Hi, my name is Eliza. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a marketing strategist in Chicago. Ever since I can remember, I've been focused on building a life that's truly mine. Growing up, my family never really noticed my efforts. They had their favorites, their assumptions, and their constant judgment. But I learned early on that success and independence are things you build quietly, without needing validation from anyone. For the past 7 years, I've worked tirelessly. Every paycheck, every bonus, every extra dollar went into something I could call my own. It wasn't flashy or loud, no expensive cars or designer bags, but a solid investment, a townhouse in the suburbs of Chicago. When I finally managed to purchase it, I kept it quiet from my family. I didn't want the interference, the opinions, or worse, the expectation that I would share it before I was ready. Little did I know that keeping it secret would save me from one of the most shocking situations of my life. One ordinary Sunday afternoon, I received a call from my cousin, Hannah. She sounded excited but a little nervous. "Eliza, you need to come to the family mansion tomorrow. Everyone's going to be there. It's important," she said. At first, I laughed nervously. Important? I hadn't even been invited to a proper family gathering in years. Not since my parents' subtle favoritism and my brother's constant competition made every visit feel like a test I would never pass. Yet, something in her voice made me pause. She didn't sound like she was joking. This was serious. I decided to go, not out of expectation, but out of curiosity. What could possibly be so urgent that they wanted me at the mansion? Driving up to the gates of the mansion the next day, I felt a wave of memories rush over me. The cold stares during family dinners, whispered comments behind my back, and the subtle ways my achievements were minimized. My parents had always had high standards, but selectively so. What I did was never quite enough. And my brother, Jason, well, he seemed to thrive on pointing out my failures while parading his successes. Pulling up to the mansion, I couldn't help but notice how extravagant everything was. The gates were tall, wrought iron with intricate designs. The driveway was lined with perfectly manicured gardens, and the walls of the mansion reflected a wealth I had only ever dreamed of from a distance. Even so, I reminded myself, this was their perception of power, not mine. I had worked hard, and this visit wasn't about proving anything, at least, not yet. As soon as I stepped inside, the reactions began. There were snickers, barely disguised, smirks, and eyes darting to and from me like I was a puzzle they couldn't solve. "Well, look who decided to show up," Jason said, his voice dripping with mockery. "We almost didn't recognize you. Thought maybe you got lost on the way here." I smiled politely, hiding the tension rising inside me. "I made sure to come on time," I replied calmly, taking note of the subtle shifts in body language around me. The laughter that followed wasn't friendly. It was the kind that cuts, the kind that reminds you of every moment they had doubted or dismissed you. Hannah came to my side, whispering, "Don't let them get to you. Just stay calm." I nodded, though inside I felt a familiar mix of anger and resolve. They had underestimated me for years, and I was used to it. But today, something had changed. I wasn't the person they thought they knew. I had grown, I had built, and now I was walking into the room carrying not just my presence, but the quiet confidence that comes from hard work and independence. The foyer was breathtaking. Chandeliers sparkled, polished marble floors reflected the sunlight streaming through the enormous windows, and the walls were decorated with art that probably cost more than my entire townhouse. And there I was, in simple attire, holding myself with dignity. Their expressions shifted between amusement, curiosity, and disbelief. Some faces showed genuine surprise, others tried to mask it with laughter. But the whispering, the side comments, the eyes that lingered, those were all meant to unsettle me. I let them talk. I let them underestimate me. That was my choice, because I knew something they didn't. I had something they had never expected, something that would shift the entire dynamic in the room, something that would make them see me not just as the sibling they used to mock, but as someone who had quietly accomplished more than they could imagine. As I settled into a chair in the grand living room, I couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and whispers circulating. "Is she really successful?" I thought she was still struggling. She must have had help. Every comment, every look, only reinforced my determination. They had built their opinions long ago, based on assumptions and old dynamics. But assumptions crumble when confronted with reality, and I was about to confront them. Before things got too intense, I turned slightly toward the Camaries, in my mind, imagining the viewers, and said, You won't believe what happened next." That statement wasn't just for effect, it was for the shock, the disbelief, the moment that would soon unfold. And honestly, I want to ask you too, if you've ever felt underestimated by your own family. Drop a comment below and share your story. It's incredible how relatable these experiences can be. At that moment, the room felt heavier. My family had no idea that the day was about to change. They thought this was just another ordinary visit, another chance to laugh, comment, or doubt. But I had my own plans, silently prepared over the years. Their initial laughter and mockery were just the beginning, prelude to a moment that would leave them stunned and questioning everything they thought they knew about me. Little did they know, I wasn't there to argue, to boast, or to fight. I was there to show the results of years of determination and patience. The mansion, the family, the whispers, they were all part of the stage, and I was ready to take the spotlight in a way they would never forget. Growing up in my family was never easy. From the very beginning, I felt like I was constantly walking on a tightrope, trying to meet expectations that seemed impossible. My parents, though loving in their own ways, often showed favoritism. My older brother Jason was always the golden child, his successes celebrated loudly, while mine were either minimized or dismissed entirely. If I brought home a good report card, it was met with a casual nod. If Jason excelled in school, it was a family event. I learned early on that my efforts rarely mattered in the eyes of those whose approval I craved the most. I remember one particular incident when I was about 12. I had saved up money from small chores and birthday gifts to buy a painting kit I had been dreaming of for months. Excitedly, I showed it to my parents, expecting at least a smile, maybe a good job. Instead, my mother barely looked up from her phone and said, "You should have spent your money on something useful. Jason could use it for his science project instead." That moment, small as it may seem, stuck with me. It was a lesson in what it meant to be undervalued, an early reminder that my desires, my accomplishments, and my dreams were secondary. Financial struggles also played a huge role in shaping my childhood. My family was not poor by any means, but money often became a source of tension and conflict. There were arguments over inheritances, over who deserved what when my grandparents passed away, and over the fairness of distributing assets. I was frequently overlooked during these discussions. My parents, while providing for me, seemed to prioritize their own financial agendas and the perceived needs of my brother. I learned that being quiet and observing could protect me from being taken advantage of, but it also reinforced the feeling of invisibility. Over the years, I started noticing patterns. Every time I achieved something meaningful, scholarship, a promotion, even a personal goal, my parents' recognition was lukewarm at best. Yet, any misstep Jason made was dissected and shared among extended family members. I often felt like I was living in a house that only celebrated one narrative, his success. It created an internal tension, a mix of resentment and determination. I knew that I couldn't rely on my family for validation, but their opinions still lingered like shadows, influencing how I viewed myself. Inheritance disputes, in particular, were eye-opening. When my grandparents passed away, my parents and Jason focused on the material assets, property, and investments. I was barely acknowledged in these conversations. The unspoken message was clear. I wasn't considered capable or deserving of handling significant responsibilities. This neglect was painful, not because of the monetary value, but because it symbolized a lack of respect and trust. I realized that in my family, value was measured not by effort or integrity, but by perceived connections and favoritism. There were also moments when I felt deliberately ignored. Family gatherings, celebrations, or even casual discussions often revolved around Jason and his accomplishments. I would sit at the table, offering input or sharing news, only to be met with nods or polite smiles that quickly moved back to the real conversation. It was subtle, almost invisible to outsiders, but deeply affecting. The repeated experience of being sidelined shaped my inner resilience. I began to understand that success isn't about being noticed by those who underestimate you, about creating a life that stands on its own, whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Despite all of this, I also witnessed glimpses of complexity in my parents. They loved me in their own way, yet they struggled with expressing pride or acknowledging achievements equally. It wasn't outright cruelty. It was a mix of flawed human behavior, unconscious favoritism, and perhaps a lack of understanding. But from a young age, I realized that I couldn't rely solely on love or recognition from my family to define my self-worth. These experiences taught me something invaluable. Independence and patience are essential. I began working towards my goals quietly, saving money, learning skills, and building my career without announcing every step. I realized that the less they knew, the less they could interfere, underestimate, or belittle me. The challenges of being undervalued fueled my determination rather than dampening it. Every slight, every dismissive comment became motivation to prove not to them, necessarily, but to myself that I was capable of creating a meaningful and successful life. In hindsight, the neglect, the favoritism, and the underestimation all became part of a larger story. One that prepared me for moments like the invitation to the family mansion, because despite all the emotional bruises and financial disputes, I had developed a sense of resilience and strategic thinking. I had learned how to navigate family dynamics without losing sight of my goals. The struggles shaped my character, made me cautious but clever, and instilled a quiet confidence that was about to be tested in the most dramatic way yet. And so, when I finally received that unexpected invitation, it wasn't just curiosity that drove me to the mansion. It was an understanding that the past had prepared me for this moment. The dismissals, the financial squabbles, and the countless instances of being undervalued had all been lessons in disguise. I knew that stepping into that mansion meant more than just attending a family gathering. It meant confronting years of assumptions and misconceptions. And deep down, I knew that this was my chance to rewrite the narrative, not through arguments or confrontation, but through the undeniable proof of what I had quietly achieved. The moment I pulled up to my family's mansion, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy coursed through me. I had not seen this house in years, and yet it remained an imposing symbol of wealth and status, one that my parents used as a constant reminder of the life I had been excluded from. As the grand gates slowly opened, the perfectly manicured gardens and polished marble driveway left me momentarily speechless. The mansion itself was a sprawling structure, with tall columns, gleaming windows, and intricate stonework that whispered stories of generations who had lived in privilege. Every corner seemed to exude opulence, the kind of wealth I had only glimpsed in magazines or during rare family vacations. Stepping out of my car, I took a deep breath. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, mixed with the scent of expensive flowers that lined the entrance. I adjusted my outfit, simple yet elegant, making sure I carried myself with confidence. Despite my careful preparation, I knew that the real test wasn't the mansion itself, but the people inside. My family's initial reactions could make or break the tone of the evening, and deep down, I was prepared for the usual blend of laughter, disbelief, and subtle mockery. As I walked up the grand staircase, I could see them waiting inside. My parents, my older brother Jason, and even some extended family members were gathered in the foyer. Their expressions were instantly telling. A few eyebrows arched as they caught sight of me, while whispered comments began circulating among them. I could hear my mother muttering something about my outdated hairstyle, while Jason's smirk immediately suggested he thought this was going to be another one of my failed attempts to impress them. The laughter, though somewhat polite, carried a sharp-edged undercurrent of disbelief, as if they were seeing a ghost from the past rather than a grown adult who had made something of themselves. I reminded myself to stay calm, to not let their skepticism affect my composure. Years of being underestimated had taught me that dignity and quiet confidence could speak louder than words. I smiled politely, greeting them with warmth, while internally noting every glance, every subtle snicker, and every sideways comment. Their reaction, I realized, was almost predictable. They had built this perception of me overlooked and supposedly unsuccessful. And for the first time, I was about to challenge that perception without saying a word. Inside, the mansion was even more breathtaking than the exterior suggested. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with delicate frescoes, casting a soft, golden glow across the polished marble floors. Expensive artwork adorned the walls, each piece meticulously chosen, likely valued in tens of thousands of dollars. A grand staircase curved elegantly into the upper floors, and the aroma of gourmet cooking hinted at the lavish dinner that awaited us. Every detail screamed wealth, but it also reminded me of the invisible barrier that had always separated me from this world, not in terms of desire, but but in terms of acceptance and recognition. As we moved into the main hall, my family's subtle insults began to surface. Jason leaned casually against a railing, tilting his head as if to measure me against some imaginary standard. "Well, you've certainly arrived," he said, a thin smile barely masking amusement. My mother added, "I wasn't expecting you to look so presentable," her tone carrying a mix of surprise and veiled judgment. Even my father, who usually remained neutral, gave a tight-lipped nod, as if to say, "We'll see if you belong here." Each comment, carefully delivered, was designed to test me, to see if I would falter or prove the outsider. Narrative they had constructed over the years. Despite their attempts to undermine me, I focused on the details around me. The mansion wasn't just a display of wealth, it was a testament to a lifestyle I had been excluded from. And yet, it was also a reminder of how far I had come independently. I had worked quietly, building my career, saving, investing, and creating a life that didn't require validation from my family. Walking through those halls, I felt a sense of quiet triumph. Their laughter and disbelief only highlighted the contrast between their expectations and the reality of my success. One of the most memorable moments came when my aunt, known for her sharp tongue, approached with a fake smile. "So, this is the famous housewarming invite," she said, her eyes scanning me up and down. "I hope you're planning to impress us tonight." The words dripped with condescension, but I simply smiled and nodded, replying politely, "I'm looking forward to being here with everyone." It was a small exchange, but it reflected years of experience in dealing with family dynamics. Acknowledge, stay composed, and let actions speak louder than words. As the evening progressed, subtle comparisons became inevitable. My family couldn't help but wonder if I truly belonged in their world of wealth, or if I was still the undervalued sibling they had always assumed me to be. Comments about my outfit, the car I drove, even the way I carried myself were meant to provoke insecurity, but I refused to let them see doubt. I had learned that confidence, when paired with quiet knowledge of one's achievements, can disarm even the harshest critics. Finally, as we gathered in the main dining room, the tension became palpable. My presence alone seemed to unsettle the familiar hierarchy. Conversations paused when I entered. Laughter halted mid-sentence, and whispers followed me as I moved through the room. Every mocking glance, every sarcastic remark, only reinforced the reality that I was no longer invisible. The mansion, with all its luxury, was no longer just a symbol of exclusion. It was now the stage for a moment that would redefine how my family saw me. By the time I sat down at the table, I had already made a mental note of every reaction, every subtle insult, and every moment of disbelief. These were the people who had laughed at my dreams, dismissed my achievements, and underestimated me for years. Yet here I was, not with arrogance, but with quiet assurance, ready to turn their skepticism into astonishment. The mansion, which once symbolized a barrier, was now the setting for a revelation they would never forget. And in that moment, as the chandeliers sparkled above us and the aroma of a lavish dinner filled the room, I knew the stage was set. Their laughter, their mockery, their disbelief, they were all about to witness a side of me that had remained hidden for years. A side that was calm, composed, and undeniably successful. As the evening unfolded at the mansion, a subtle tension began to build in the air. It was as if my presence had disturbed the delicate balance of my family's expectations. Their polite laughter, and seemingly harmless comments from earlier, now felt sharper, laced with skepticism and doubt. Every movement I made, every word I uttered, seemed to be measured against some invisible standard that only they valued. The room, grand and luxurious, felt suddenly constrictive, like a courtroom where my life and achievements were on trial. My parents, who had once ignored or dismissed me, now exchanged glances that spoke volumes. My father's eyes, narrowed slightly, carried the silent question, "Is this really the same person we thought we knew?" My mother, always the more vocal of the two, whispered under her breath just loud enough for the nearby cousins to hear, "I wonder if all those years of saving and planning actually got him anywhere." The words were meant to undermine, to make me second-guess myself, but I had learned to steel my mind against such jabs long ago. Jason, my older brother, leaned casually against a chair, with a smirk that had become all too familiar. "So, you've been keeping secrets, huh?" he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "I mean, who even knew you were capable of this? You've always been quiet." A little too quiet. His comment was both a challenge and an insult, implying that my success was unlikely, perhaps even accidental. I smiled politely, choosing not to respond with sarcasm, because I knew the most powerful response would be revealed through actions, not words. As the conversation continued, more family members joined in, each contributing their own subtle doubts. My cousin Rachel, known for her sharp tongue, leaned in with feigned curiosity. "And this big achievement? It's really yours?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. Not some fluke or lucky break. It was clear that the undercurrent of skepticism ran deep. Even extended family members, who barely knew me, felt compelled to question the legitimacy of my accomplishments. Internally, a whirlwind of emotions surged through me. Frustration, yes, but also a quiet sense of determination. I remembered all the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the financial sacrifices, and the patience it had taken to build a life on my own terms. Each doubt cast by my family only reinforced the narrative I had been telling myself for years, that success, when achieved quietly and diligently, could speak louder than any insult or skepticism. My mind replayed the countless moments when I had been undervalued, dismissed, or outright ignored. And now, for the first time, the stage was set for a revelation that would leave no room for doubt. The subtle insults continued. Disguised as casual conversation, Jason leaned toward his friends and muttered loud enough for me to hear, "I mean, he's nice and all, but let's see how long this success lasts." His voice carried both doubt and condescension, a clear signal that they expected failure, at the very least, a faltering. My mother chimed in with a laugh that sounded a little too forced. "Yes, let's see if he's really grown into the person he claims to be." The words were meant to belittle, but they only fueled a quiet fire within me. Despite their arrogance, I focused on maintaining composure. I reminded myself that their doubt was rooted in years of preconceived notions, jealousy, and perhaps even regret for having overlooked me in the past. I allowed myself to observe each interaction carefully, noting who seemed genuinely curious, who was dismissive, and who harbored silent resentment. Every glance, every smirk, every whispered comment added layers to the tension, but also built the narrative of my eventual vindication. One of the most telling moments came during dinner, when my father, attempting to assert his usual authority, asked casually, "So, tell us again how you managed all this on your own. It must have been challenging." His tone was laced with skepticism, implying that my accomplishments were unlikely to be legitimate without their guidance or approval. I took a sip of water, letting the silence linger before responding with calm precision. It was challenging, yes, but I planned carefully, saved diligently, and made calculated decisions. It wasn't easy, but it was entirely my effort. The simplicity and clarity of my words seemed to momentarily unsettle him. There was no arrogance, no defensiveness, just quiet confidence. My mother, not to be outdone, added, "But surely you had help somewhere along the way. Family, friends. Someone must have guided you." Again, her words were designed to diminish my achievements, to frame my independence as improbable. I smiled politely, letting her question hang in the air without providing the affirmation she sought. The tension was palpable. They expected me to falter, to show doubt or insecurity, but all I felt was a quiet strength that came from years of self-reliance and perseverance. As the evening progressed, the family's underestimation became increasingly transparent. They asked leading questions, made subtle jabs about financial decisions, and compared me to my siblings and cousins in ways that suggested superiority on their part. But I noticed something interesting. With every doubt and condescending remark, they revealed more about their own insecurities. The more they tried to undermine me, the more evident it became that their perception of me was outdated and incomplete. In my mind, I reflected on all the moments that had led me here, the birthday parties I had been excluded from, the vacations I had never been invited on, the inheritance disputes I had silently endured. Each instance of neglect had forged resilience, patience, and determination. And now, in this very mansion, surrounded by their skepticism and judgment, I understood that their doubts were nothing more than a prelude to astonishment. By the time dessert arrived, the tension in the room had reached its peak. Every whisper, every skeptical glance, every sarcastic remark had contributed to a thick atmosphere of doubt and underestimation. But I sat quietly, letting their condescension roll off my shoulders. I had learned long ago that patience and composure were more powerful than confrontation. What they didn't yet realize was that the culmination of years of effort, discipline, and silent perseverance was about to speak louder than any words, doubts, or mockery could ever achieve. And in that moment, as I observed their subtle doubts and listened to their condescending remarks, I felt a sense of calm anticipation. This was the tension, the build-up to a revelation that would leave them speechless. The moment when the underestimation would be shattered completely, and the reality of my success would be undeniable. The room had been thick with tension for hours, a quiet storm of skepticism, subtle insults, and underestimation. I had patiently endured every glance, every comment, every whispered jab, knowing that the moment of truth was coming, and now, the time had finally arrived. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of calm, confidence, and excitement, and reached for the envelope that would completely shift the atmosphere in the grand mansion. "This," I began, holding up the envelope with a composed smile, "is something I want to share with all of you." The words were simple, yet every eye in the room instantly turned toward me. My parents, my siblings, cousins, even distant relatives, everyone leaned in, curiosity mingling with disbelief. They had no idea what was inside, and I intended to make sure they truly understood the significance. Slowly, deliberately, I opened the envelope and revealed the documents, a transfer deed and details of a $10 million gift I had prepared. It wasn't just money, it was a testament to years of silent effort, discipline, and determination. I watched as the initial confusion on their faces transformed into sheer shock. For a moment, the room was silent, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. My father was the first to react, his jaw dropping slightly as he muttered under his breath, "Is this real?" My mother's eyes widened, and she instinctively reached out, almost as if touching the documents would confirm their authenticity. Jason, my older brother, who had mocked my quiet demeanor earlier, stumbled for words. "Wait, you actually?" His voice trailed off, replaced by a stunned silence that betrayed his disbelief. The cousins began whispering among themselves, exchanging glances filled with astonishment and envy. Rachel, always the most outspoken, struggled to mask her shock. I didn't know you had this much," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. The disbelief in her tone was unmistakable. She had genuinely underestimated my abilities and my commitment to building a life on my own. As I observed their reactions, I felt a mixture of emotions myself. Satisfaction, certainly, but also empathy. I had watched them dismiss me for years, question my decisions, and even doubt my worth, and now, as they processed the reality of the gift, I understood that their astonishment was not just about the money, it was about the realization that I had quietly, methodically achieved something remarkable without their guidance, approval, or assistance. My father, ever the authority figure, finally broke the silence, his voice tight with a mix of disbelief and regret. I didn't realize, all these years, we underestimated you." His words were halting, awkward, and yet there was a sincerity in them that I had longed to hear. My mother, similarly shaken, admitted softly, "I suppose we never truly knew what you were capable of." The weight of their words hung in the air, a combination of belated recognition and unspoken remorse. The entire evening projecting arrogance now looked pale. His earlier smirk was gone, replaced by a bewildered expression that spoke volumes. "All this, on your own?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I nodded, calmly, allowing the room to absorb the full impact. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the realization that he had dismissed my potential for years. And now the truth was undeniable. The emotional tension in the room was electric. Envy, regret, disbelief, and admiration collided in a chaotic mix of expressions and whispered conversations. My cousin Mark, usually so confident and dismissive, muttered under his breath, "I can't believe it. All this time, we thought he was just lucky." His words were not wrong, but they missed the essence of my journey, the relentless effort, the strategic planning, the sacrifices that had quietly accumulated into this moment of undeniable success. As I looked around, I noticed subtle changes in posture, expressions, even tone. The mockery and condescension that had dominated the evening were replaced by hesitation and tentative respect. It was as if the very act of revealing the gift had reshaped the dynamics of the room. My family, who had so confidently underestimated me, now had to confront a reality that challenged every preconceived notion they held. For a moment, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. This wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong for the sake of ego. It was about recognition, about demonstrating the value of persistence, patience, and self-belief. Every doubt, every insult, every comment that had once stung now seemed insignificant in the presence of the undeniable truth. The realization gradually sank in. My father, always the skeptic, finally nodded slowly, a mix of admiration and regret in his eyes. We never imagined you could accomplish this on your own," he admitted. My mother reached out, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder, her voice gentle but filled with emotion. "We were wrong to doubt you," she said. Even Jason, though still processing, managed a strained smile. The first sign of acknowledgement from him all evening. Jealousy, too, was evident in the room, though it was tempered by a newfound respect. Some whispered about missed opportunities, about their own failures to plan or save, about the years they had spent underestimating me. But I understood those feelings. They were natural human reactions when confronted with the unexpected success of someone they had dismissed. As I handed over the gift formally, watching each person process its significance, I felt a profound sense of closure. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, and ignored had culminated in this moment of undeniable achievement. The $10 million gift was more than money. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and triumph over doubt. By the end of the evening, the mansion felt different. The laughter and mockery that had once filled the halls were replaced by cautious admiration and quiet reflection. My family had seen a side of me they had ignored for years, and the shock of the $10 million gift had forced them to acknowledge my success on my own terms. Disbelief had given way to respect, regret mingled with admiration, and jealousy softened into reluctant acknowledgement. And in that quiet transformation, I realized something essential. Success is most powerful when it speaks for itself. Words, doubt, and mockery fade when faced with tangible achievement. That $10 million gift was not just a financial surprise, it was a revelation, a turning point, and a lesson in patience, perseverance, and self-belief. The revelation of the $10 million gift had shifted everything in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. The room, once filled with laughter, disbelief, and subtle jabs, now pulsed with a different energy, an energy of cautious respect, tentative admiration, and, in some cases, silent regret. It was as if the walls themselves, grand and imposing as they were, had absorbed the tension and were now reflecting a new reality. I had finally claimed my place, not by argument or insistence, but by the undeniable results of my own effort. First subtle change was in the way my family spoke to me. Before, conversations had been punctuated by condescension, rolling eyes, and underhanded comments. Now, even simple questions carried a tone of acknowledgement. My father, who had often dismissed my opinions in family discussions, sought my advice on investments and financial planning, his earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet curiosity. He asked me questions not to challenge me, but to genuinely understand my approach, my methods, and my thought process. The shift was subtle, yet unmistakable. Respect had been earned, silently but powerfully. My mother too was transformed. The disbelief that had clouded her face the night of the revelation had softened into a mix of pride and admiration. She began to reflect on the times she had underestimated me, moments where her doubts had overshadowed her faith. Slowly, she started including me in family decisions that she had once assumed I had no interest or stake in. Her newfound recognition was humbling, not only for her but for MIT. Was proof that patience, consistency, and quiet perseverance could slowly change even the most entrenched perceptions. Jason, my older brother, was perhaps the most fascinating case. His initial reaction had been a combination of shock, envy, and incredulity. Over time, however, I noticed a transformation in him as well. He began treating me differently, not with mockery, but with a careful acknowledgement of my accomplishments. Our previous tension, the unspoken competition, and the sense of him always trying to prove superiority, slowly gave way to a tentative collaboration. He asked for guidance, sought my opinions, and even apologized 4 times he had dismissed me outright. Watching him evolve from skepticism to acceptance was a profound reminder that success often speaks louder than any argument. and that time and patience can turn even rivalry into respect. The extended family, too, was affected. Cousins, who had once whispered critiques, now approached me with curiosity and admiration. Some even confessed that they had assumed my achievements were luck or temporary, only to realize the depth of discipline and effort behind my journey. Conversations that had previously revolved around gossip or judgment now shifted toward interest in my process, my strategies, and my vision for the future. It was a subtle but significant validation, not just of wealth, but of character and perseverance. Emotionally, the aftermath was a mixture of satisfaction and introspection. I realized that the gift had not only revealed my financial success, but had also revealed something deeper: the value of standing firm in your convictions, of working quietly toward your goals, and of letting results speak for themselves. There was a profound sense of closure in this, an emotional release from years of doubt, underestimation, and subtle family neglect. For the first time, I felt fully recognized, not because of confrontation, but because of patience and the undeniable proof of achievement. At the same time, I observed the ripple effects of the revelation. Family gatherings were no longer arenas of judgment or subtle insult. The tone had shifted from condescension to cautious respect, from envy to reflection, from dismissal to curiosity. There was still an undercurrent of complexity. Some old habits die hard, but the foundation had undeniably changed. I found myself interacting with my family in a new way, guided not by anger or defensiveness, but by confidence, calm, and empathy. One of the most powerful lessons was the subtle transformation in the perception of time and patience. Years of working quietly, saving diligently, and making strategic choices, actions that my family had often overlooked, were finally understood as the backbone of real achievement. It was clear that respect is not given simply because of proximity or familiarity. It is earned through consistency, perseverance, and integrity. The $10 million gift was merely a catalyst, a concrete manifestation of the years of dedication that had gone unnoticed. Another lesson lay in the understanding of humility and empathy. Even as I experienced the satisfaction of finally being recognized, I felt a strong sense of compassion toward my family. Their jealousy, regret, and amazement were human reactions to a sudden shift in power dynamics. I realized that turning the tables didn't require vengeance or malice. It required demonstrating strength, success, and self-assuredness in a way that allowed them to confront their own biases and errors. The emotional maturity that came with this understanding was as rewarding as the financial achievement itself. As weeks passed, the family dynamics continued to evolve. Invitations to gatherings became more genuine, conversations more balanced, and interactions more meaningful. My family no longer saw me as the underdog or the quietly ignored member. They saw me as a person who had quietly built a life of stability, success, and independence. This shift, subtle as it was, reinforced the power of silent effort over loud complaints, of action over argument, and of patience over impulsiveness. In the end, the aftermath of the gift was not merely about money, it was about transformation. It was about the subtle but profound change in how my family viewed me, how they interacted with me, and how they came to respect the dedication and resilience that had defined my journey. It was a lesson in patience, in the quiet accumulation of effort, and in the profound impact of demonstrating value through action rather than words. Emotionally, I felt a sense of closure that I had never experienced before. The years of being overlooked, doubted, and underestimated had been acknowledged, not through confrontation, but through undeniable proof. Gratitude filled me, not just for the opportunity to share the gift, but for the journey that had led me here. I finally understood that recognition, respect, and acknowledgement often arrive in unexpected ways, and that patience, self-belief, and perseverance are the ultimate instruments of empowerment. And so, as I reflected on the changes, the lessons learned, and the quiet triumph that had transformed not only my life but also the dynamics within my family, I realized something profound. True empowerment comes not from forcing recognition, but from earning it silently, patiently, and confidently. The tables had turned, and the lesson was clear: respect, success, and patience are inseparable companions on the journey to personal triumph. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of revelations, surprises, and family dynamics, I found myself reflecting deeply on everything that had transpired. The journey that had begun with years of quiet perseverance, unacknowledged efforts, and subtle neglect had now culminated in a moment of recognition that was as empowering as it was humbling. Looking back, I realized that the true reward wasn't the $10 million gift or the sudden admiration, it was the personal growth I had achieved through patience, resilience, and unwavering commitment to my own goals. Growing up, I had often felt invisible within my own family. My opinions were dismissed, my achievements ignored, and my ambitions questioned. At times, the lack of support and encouragement felt suffocating, leaving me with a lingering sense of doubt. Yet, instead of letting these feelings define me, I chose to channel them into action. Every late night spent saving, every cautious investment, and every strategic decision was a step toward proving not to them, but to myself that I could build a life of independence, stability, and success. The moment of recognition was profound. As my family witnessed the results of my silent efforts, the $10 million gift that no one had anticipated, their shock and awe were mirrored by my own sense of validation. For the first time, I felt seen, truly seen, for the years of discipline, determination, and careful planning that had gone unnoticed. It was a reminder that personal growth is often invisible to others, but its impact is undeniable. True empowerment comes from within, and external acknowledgement, while gratifying, is simply a reflection of what has already been achieved in silence. Gratitude became the central emotion in the days that followed. I was grateful not only for the recognition from my family but also for the lessons learned along the way. Each moment of doubt, each instance of neglect, had shaped my character, teaching me resilience, patience, and the importance of self-belief. I understood that the struggles I faced were not obstacles meant to break me, but opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more determined. Gratitude for these experiences transformed my perspective, allowing me to appreciate both the journey and the outcome. Reflecting on the changes within my family, I realized how much perspective can shift when someone quietly proves their worth. The laughter, mockery, and disbelief that had once filled the mansion were replaced by cautious respect, admiration, and even curiosity. My parents, once dismissive, began engaging with me on equal footing, seeking my guidance and acknowledging my achievements. My siblings, who had often competed or doubted, approached me with a newfound respect and openness. The transformation in family dynamics was a testament to the power of patience and consistent effort. It showed that results, when allowed to speak for themselves, have a voice that cannot be ignored beyond family. I also noticed a change within myself. The experience had instilled a deeper sense of confidence and self-assurance. I no longer felt the need to justify my actions or prove my worth to anyone. The journey had reinforced the belief that success is not about loud declarations or seeking validation from others. It is about consistent effort, thoughtful decisions, and the quiet accumulation of accomplishments over time. I felt empowered, not by wealth or recognition alone, but by the knowledge that I had built something meaningful entirely on my own terms. Equally important was the lesson in humility. While I experienced pride in my achievements and satisfaction in being recognized, I was also mindful of the complexities of human relationships. My family's initial reactions, shock, envy, and disbelief, were natural responses to an unexpected shift in dynamics. Instead of reacting with bitterness or pride, I chose empathy, understanding that recognition could take time for some to process. The ability to navigate these emotions with grace and patience was, in itself, a reflection of personal growth and emotional maturity. As the weeks passed, the mansion gatherings became less about competition or judgment and more about genuine connection. Conversations were enriched by mutual respect, laughter replaced skepticism, and interactions carried warmth rather than condescension. Witnessing this transformation reinforced the idea that patience, persistence, and quiet action often pave the way for meaningful change, not only in one's own life but in the lives of those around us. Looking back, I realized that the $10 million gift, while extraordinary, was ultimately symbolic. It represented the culmination of years of hard work, disciplined choices, and the courage to pursue my own path, despite doubt and neglect. The true gift was the recognition, respect, and emotional closure that accompanied it. It reminded me that our efforts, no matter how quietly pursued, are never wasted. They accumulate, creating ripples that eventually reach even the most skeptical observers. The closing lesson, one that I carry with me every day, is clear: never underestimate someone who works silently. There is power in quiet determination, resilience in patient effort, and strength in unwavering self-belief. Those who dismiss or mock may do so without understanding the depth of commitment and perseverance that lie beneath the surface. But eventually, results reveal themselves, and recognition follows not through demand, but through undeniable achievement. As I reflect on my journey, I am filled with gratitude, not only for the tangible outcomes, but for the internal growth and self-awareness that have defined this chapter of my life. I have learned that empowerment comes not from external validation alone, but from the confidence to pursue goals with focus and integrity. Recognition, when it arrives, is simply the acknowledgement of that journey. And so, as the story closes, I leave this final thought for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Trust your efforts, value your journey, and remain steadfast in your pursuit. The world may not notice immediately, but your persistence, your patience, and your quiet determination will ultimately speak louder than any words ever could. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone, maybe at work, at home, or even by family? How did you handle it? I'd love for you to share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who's facing the same situation. And if you've enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, stories of determination, patience, and standing up for yourself, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with friends who might relate, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you look at challenges in your own life.